So we are live. We are
Oh,
on.
well, hello there.
Hello there. We should do our spiel. Um, I'm gonna let you do it today.
Um,
Open it any way you want.
hello.
You get the chance to go first, and you just say your own thing.
I have no idea what. Apparently, I
You,
never pay attention to you because I
you
have
rebel.
no idea what to say right now.
You rebel. All right. What is up, party people? You have today two large, in charge, and fantastic, gorgeous ghouls,
Yes.
bitches, that are going to be bringing you a very peculiar, I almost said pecan, and I don't know why. We're going to be bringing you a very peculiar case.
Yeah.
So,
So she was
Zool,
a pretty bad bitch herself. I'll say.
so from two bad bitches, let's talk about this bad bitch. What happened?
Well, today I bring you the story of a woman that was murdered,
Go
and
figure.
then her ghost named
uh,
her murderer.
on this podcast, I mean, go figure, we're talking about murder.
Did she come back from the grave, or is there a more logical explanation? Well, you're going to have to wait until the end to decide.
Ooh, all right, guys, saddle up. Get your what is it? EMP or EMF? What is it? Get your uh
E-
EVT. No, EVP.
yeah, there
sorry,
you go.
sorry. Get your EVP meters out. Put on your ghost goggles, and let's solve this case.
Teresita Basa, I'm not sure how you pronounce her last name, was an immigrant from the Philippines who was found mysteriously murdered in her Chicago apartment in 1977. Police were stumped by the crime that seemed to have no motives and no leads. Teresita was born in 1929 in the Philippines. She migrated to the United States in the 1960s in the hopes of earning a better life. Initially, she came to the States to study music. She was pursuing a master's degree in music and would frequently give out complimentary piano lessons to neighborhood children.
That's pretty awesome.
She she eventually changed her mind and decided that there was no money in a music career, and she ultimately became a respiratory therapist, and she worked at Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. Fun fact about this hospital, that's located just outside Chicago, Illinois. That really has nothing to do with her case, but I came across it and I just thought everybody else should know. Thanks, Frank Sinatra was a patient at this hospital at some point, and this hospital is the birthplace of serial killer John Wayne Gacy.
No shit.
Yep.
Okay, wow, that's hella cool.
So, well, back to Teresita. Her colleagues at Edgewater Hospital described her as quiet, intelligent, and unassuming. They all said she was kind and generous, but she really kept to herself.
Okay.
On February 21st, 1977, Ruth, who was a friend of Teresita, stated and testified that she phoned Teresita. They chatted for about 30 minutes. According to Ruth, Teresita had a normal day. She went to work as usual. She left the hospital at 5:30. She made it home shortly after that. That's when she talked to Ruth on the phone. And she got off the phone because she had a male visitor arrive. Now she just told Ruth, "Hey, I have company. My company just arrived." Got off the phone. So Ruth didn't know who came, but she let them in. That she was expecting them.
So this wasn't a stranger just coming to her door. This was someone she had invited over, someone that she was expecting. And I got to be honest, to put it out there like this, this is one of the reasons why, party people, we now have technology that allows us to share our location. that allows us to FaceTime to show somebody else who's with us or where we are. And it also allows us to not only name and figure out who this other person is, but we can now trace their family so far back that we can figure out who they are when they commit these type of atrocious crimes.
So, Teresita got off the phone with Ruth. That same night, the fire department in Chicago responded to the Pine Grove Avenue apartments for the reports of smelling of smoke. When the firefighters entered the apartment building, they followed the trails and signs of smoke to Teresita's apartment. The firefighters could easily tell somebody had deliberately set the fire. The signs all pointed towards arson. The flames were isolated only in the bedroom. There was discarded matchbooks tossed around. There was remnants of things used as like kindling, like paper and crumpled up bags. And everything else was cleared away from the bed. The bed was what was on fire, and everything else was moved away. There was an absence of anything else flammable other than the kindling and the bed. Firefighters found that on top of the bed was clothing mixed with the paper and kindling. That was what was set on fire on top of the bed.
That makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
No sense at all.
After the firefighters got the fire out, the fire lieutenant and his strongest crew members had to move the mattress that had melted to the floor. This is when they found Teresita. The lieutenant wrote in his report that Teresita was a mass of burned human flesh. She was beneath the mattress, so whoever did this put the mattress on top of her and the clothing and everything on top of her. They also found in the exact center of her chest, embedded all the way to the wooden handle, was a knife. Firefighters also observed that the apartment seemed to have been looted, leading authorities to assume that Teresita's murder was a burglary gone wrong. Police responded and immediately started to process the scene. Her legs were staged, spread wide open, and she was naked, which provoked the authorities to assume that the sexual assault was the motive. However, her autopsy showed that there was no semen, no signs of sexual assault, and the autopsy also revealed that Teresita was actually still a virgin.
See, and that's okay. I get it. Our law enforcement, our detectives' jobs are very difficult, especially you're walking into a scene, which is, a very big puzzle, and you got to put that puzzle together to figure out what happened. But I feel like sometimes that our law enforcement goes by such a strict diagram, they can't see outside of the box what possibly could have happened. And it takes and it wastes precious time when they're trying to prove a sexual assault angle, and the autopsy is like, no, she's actually still, her hymen is still intact.
Mm-hmm. She did have some burns on her body, but these burns were post-mortem, and her cause of death was due to several stab wounds, the primary one being the one in her chest. Most of Teresita's belongings were destroyed in the fire. The police had very little to go on. There was one clue, however, a handwritten note found it somewhere in her apartment that said, "Get theater tickets for AS," but no one seems to know who AS is. There was also no signs of forced entry, and the police really couldn't tell if anything was missing from her apartment or not.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Teresita's case sat cold for 6 months. There was no leads, no clues, other than the initials AS. That is until one of Teresita's former co-workers comes forward with a bizarre story. Dr. Jose Chua Jr. contacted the police and told them that his wife, Remy, had been having visions, dreams, and hallucinations about Teresita. When Remy would go into these catatonic like states, she would not be able to remember what she said or happened during this time. But during these episodes, she would go into a trance and she would speak to her husband in unusual ways, in different voices and even different languages.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Often stating things like, "Doctor, I need your help. That man who murdered me is still on the loose." When he asked who he was speaking to, she would respond, "Teresita." Jose started to sedate his wife because the visions would not stop. Teresita kept coming back from the grave and kept speaking through Remy. In the trances, Teresita's ghost pointed the fingers at a man named Alan Showery, a respiratory therapist who was a co-worker of both Jose and Teresita.
So, okay, question. This is very, I mean, it's very, it's scary for one thing, and then for another. But do we know if there was any kind of, let's put a little scientific, little science to the test. Do we know if she had any type of mental health issues, mental illness? Was she was she kind of prone to exaggerations, or was she a pretty straight up, person? And this just all started happening out of the blue after her very good friend is killed.
As far as I can tell, um, there was no real mental health. She didn't have any mental health issues or anything like that. Her husband, Jose, he didn't say anything because he thought she was just so depressed and just so worked up about the murder of her friend that she just couldn't deal with it, and she was in the midst of a mental break. But then after he started sedating her, and it didn't help. She would still talk to him as Teresita in the sedation. And so that's when he was like, okay, I need to get more help. So he went to the hospital, from my understanding, and reported it to the hospital, trying to get her looked at for seizures and things like that initially, and then it kind of trickled to the police from there. I think you're muted.
I got dogs barking all over the place. Go, Bearcat. Go, Bubba. In or out. Come on. And which that's completely understandable. I mean, they were very close. They were like sisters. And so she's missing her, her sister, but how scary it must have been for her.
Right. Well, she couldn't remember it. She didn't remember any of it happening. It was just her husband telling her after the fact that what she was saying and doing, and she didn't actually remember the being entranced.
Can you imagine feeling like you're losing your mind because you wake up in the morning, or you get woken up in the middle of the night, and your husband's like, you know what? You've been speaking in Latin.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know?
I think that she was speaking in Filipino or whatever language was Teresita's.
Probably that. Yeah, if I remember right, actually she was speaking in Teresina's native tongue, but it wasn't her native tongue.
No, it wasn't. She didn't know that language at all. Alan Showery was never a suspect in Teresita's murder until her ghost accused him of the crime. According to the doctor and his wife, Teresita's ghost had told them that Showery had come to her home to repair her television. but instead he choked her to death and then set her body on fire. Now, if we remember the autopsy, there's a conflict in the story because the autopsy shows that she died of stabbed wounds and not, there was no evidence of her being choked.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is, okay, so where is that information? Why is that information coming through? Because she was not choked. She wasn't strangled
Right.
at all.
One thing that they could prove, though, that Teresita's ghost was telling them through the entranced Remy was that there was things taken from her apartment, and it was specific pieces of jewelry that was stolen, what their significance was, and she even told the family, like Remy and Jose, who they could reach out to identify the jewelry that was stolen, and even gave them the personal phone numbers to the family that can identify them.
No,
and that all
shit.
checked out. All the phone numbers were good and everything. So,
Wow.
at some point, a private investigator gets involved, but I couldn't find anywhere who actually hired this private investigator. But on the night of August 11th, so this has been 6 months since her murder, the private investigator, Joshua Statula and Lee Eplin, went to Alan's apartment
Okay.
and questioned him. He originally stated that him and Teresita worked together, but that he was not at her apartment on the night she was murdered. They, of course, left, came back a different day, and his statement changed because, like all killers, they can't keep their story straight.
Oh yeah, and I know we've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. For anybody out there committing atrocious crimes, thank you for being somewhat stupid.
Right. On the second interview with the private investigators, Alan told them that he went to her apartment to help fix her TV, but he left before nightfall. It was on this visit that the private investigators noticed Alan's wife had a specific piece of jewelry on, specifically a pearl cocktail ring that matched the exact description of one that Teresita had said was stolen.
How many cases have we heard where that has happened? Ted Bundy gave, I believe her name was Michelle, his long-term partner, he gave her a bracelet. John Wayne Gacy had given out watches and other things. And if I remember right, BTK, Dennis Rader, gave his daughter and his wife pieces of jewelry from his victims. That's a way for them to relive over and over, is that little tattletale of, oh, look, she's wearing her ring.
Mm-hmm. When the stolen jewelry of Teresita is brought up to Alan, he immediately admits to killing her, and he signed a 13-page confession that stated that he went to her house under the rouge to fix her TV, but he really went to rob her.
Mm-hmm.
The motive was that he needed money for rent, and he was only able to steal the jewelry and about $30 from Teresita. He was arrested the same night and booked in the Cook County Jail, where he was held at a $500,000 bond.
Ooh.
Before his arrest, that's a lot in the 70s.
That's what I started to say. That's a lot in the 70s.
Before his arrest, police officials were unaware that Teresita had any jewelry stolen. So I'm assuming that the private detectives were hired by her friend Remy and Jose, who she was haunting. And they were the only ones with the private investigators that were aware of the jewelry. As the investigation deepens, police obviously never believed that Remy was being possessed by Teresita. The Police, however, came to their own conclusions, which to this day, Remy claims is not the truth and that Teresita was truly speaking through her. However, the police have uncovered that Alan had given some of the jewelry to women who worked around the hospital. The police believe that Remy, who also worked at the hospital, saw this exchange happen and recognized the jewelry as Teresita's. She then concocted the story of being possessed by Teresita's ghost because she was afraid of retaliation from Alan if she told the police what she saw.
Okay, but once he's in custody, why would she still be afraid of to telling them what she saw? Why would she stay?
Maybe now it's the fame and the that this bizarre thing happened and now she's famous. And
yeah, that's true.
During Alan's trial, prosecutor Thomas Organ stated that had the police not checked on the tip, they would have been negligent. I'm sure none of us have ever heard a story as bizarre as this, but the police could not ignore it. The judge said that whether or not the detective believed that Teresita was possessing the doctor's wife, it was their job to look into it.
Mm-hmm.
In January 1979, Alan went on trial, which lasted 8 days. A jury deliberated for 13 hours, but they could not reach a verdict. Although the first trial for Alan Showery resulted in a hung jury, on February 23, 1979, 2 years after Teresita was murdered, Alan Showery pled guilty against his lawyer's advice, and he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. He ultimately was let out on parole in 1983, and evidence suggests that he now resides in New York City.
Okay, but now, he was released in 83. So 93, 2003, 13.
I think he was in his 30s back then, so he would have been...
He's got to be in his 70s now.
Mm-hmm.
If he's even still around.
I couldn't find an obituary or anything on him. I was trying to even find a picture. I couldn't even find a picture of him.
I've noticed how that happens sometimes. They just kind of fade away.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want that recognition. Well, you don't blame them. Shit, you weren't out to be a career serial killer. You needed a little help with the rent. We all need a little help with the rent sometimes, but
right. So what do you think? Do you think that the police's theory that she saw the jewelry and concocted this story, and then, or do you think my only thing is the choking. I wonder if he choked Teresita originally and caused her to pass out.
You know what?
And that's what she remembers, and then the stabbing happened while she was unconscious.
That's a major possibility. Maybe that's what he did to kind of subdue her, as he choked her until she blacked out. And then we've talked about this before, and our true crime aficionados will know this.
There wasn't any defensive wounds.
Well, no.
So she didn't have any defensive wounds, which you would think she would have if she's being stabbed. And she was already naked, from my understanding, because she was naked and the knife was still lodged in her chest. That would be very hard to...
Yeah. Is it maybe a possibility they were having an affair?
Well, she was a virgin.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
I mean, they could have been partaking in other ways, I guess. You can't be a virgin in your butthole.
Or your mouth.
True. But, I mean...
you know what? I believe it. I mean, my spiritual, or however you want to say it, my belief system says that we're all connected because we're all matter. We're all atoms, but we are also, because we feel these soul connections to other people. It's maybe that's what it is. And maybe she was able to talk to her from beyond the grave. It wouldn't surprise me.
Another thing that I don't understand about this scenario is if she's possessing her friend's not able to remember this conversations apparently, so she's talking to the husband, the doctor, who she really doesn't know. She wasn't friends with this man. She just knew him by association. So it's kind of a little bit backwards. You'd think she would try to possess the doctor to
To
talk to
tell,
her friend.
yeah, I didn't think of that. But you know what? Yeah, why? Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to
Or
rewind my
maybe,
whole feeling. Why wouldn't she? Why wouldn't she possess a detective? If she could possess anybody, why wouldn't she possess?
well, maybe that's part of it. Maybe maybe it had to be somebody that was she had a deep connection with, and that's why she was able to possess her friend.
That's a big, yeah, that makes sense. Come here, Cater. Wow.
Can you imagine how much energy that would take as a ghost, too?
Oh, yeah. Well, and not only that, I mean, I'm still kind of like the whole thing. Like, if it happened to me, I would seriously wake up and be like, "Oh my god, I'm going nuts. You need to sedate me." And then nobody's message would ever get through because I'd be stoned out on Valium all the time.
Right?
What do you think, Tater? Tater says she thinks it's possible.
She does. I can see it in her face.
If,
Well, if I'm ever murdered, just know that I'm coming for you, Stacy.
why? What'd I do?
I'm gonna possess you.
So I'm gonna actually get to have a dump truck butt. I've never had
Yeah,
I've never had a butt.
that's gonna be our code word: dump truck
Dump
butt.
truck. So I mean, I could just see it. I'm in here sad as hell because Lav's not with me, and then all of a sudden, out of my mouth to the
Dump
dog,
truck, dump truck.
and then wake up from it like, oh shit! She said she was gonna possess me.
Your wife's gonna be like, "What is wrong with you?"
I don't know. She said you're a pretty good looking chick. She may like it. So tell us in the comments, guys. Do you believe Teresita's ghost broke all planes of existence, talked through her friend to get her murder solved? Or was this all just a little
Elaborate hoax.
flight of fancy?
Well, it wasn't even a hoax though, because he did murder her. He confessed to it, but
Did she use the supernatural as a cover up so that she didn't get
she wouldn't
hurt
get
herself?
exactly.
Let us know. And, I know we have said this before, but it really helps us out when you give us ratings, 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars. If you're going to do it under 3 stars, why are you even listening to us?
Right.
But
Just cuss us out in our email.
cuss us
We'll
out in
make
an
sure we
email.
talk about it. We'll tag you in that episode too.
Yes, we will. And another there is another too. If you have a subject you would like us to talk about, send us a message. We will research it. We will talk about it. We'll bring you on as a guest if you want to be on. We will credit you for what your idea was. Because, sometimes people know things we don't know. I mean, it's not likely anybody knows anything Lab doesn't know. But,
I don't know about that. I'm winging it here, guys.
I've been winging it for 50 years. And with dog kisses later, catch us on the flip side.
Bye.
So I'm not even going to stop it because I'll just through there.
Roll right in.
Yeah. Tater, you got to
Sounds
get down. Tater has to have surgery. She got to get her popo taken out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she got to go to a specialist.
Is it going to help her?
Yeah. She'll stop getting so many UTIs.
Oh, that'll be nice.
Yeah. Well, our little prolapse. I'm not going to be able to focus with you up here, little girl. Okay. Say bye, love. Say bye. Bye. Oh. So the place that we stayed at. Ah, Tater!
She poop on you?
She pooped on me. Ew. Okay, I'll be right back. Wow. That's a big one, Tater. Leave it, Bearcat. There ain't nothing up there to eat, Nene. This dinner snatcher. Okay, look out, Bo. I know. I can look. Thank you for kissing me, though. Okay, look out. All right, come on. All right, come on. Look out. All right. Go get him, Tatey. Go get her, Bear. All right, we'll come in here. How about that? That's fine, too. Yeah. Here's your pickle. Go chew your pickle. All right. Okay, now, this one's serious, guys. Hi, Brown. Hi. I'm not feeding them, I promise. Okay, almost ready. I need to have Zach feed the dogs again. All right. I'm going to take just a second and let him. I'll edit it out. I always do. So, real quick, and then we'll start the episode. So, the beginning of this episode, I'm going to do an AI opening for it. So, it's gonna give like a brief description of what we're gonna do, and then it'll go right into the episode. So, all right, guys, everybody out, go, let's go. Zach, feed the dogs, please. Go, Lil. Go, Lil. Come on. All right, just come back in here. Come on, guys. Come on, Tuba. Come on, Tuba. Come on, Bearcat. Come on, Tuba. Come on, Bug. Come on. You can come in. Come on in. Oh, okay. Get back on my side here. Okay. So we'll be ready, and pull my hair out. 3, 2. What's up, party people?
Hello, hello, hello.
So we have a very special episode for you guys for today. We are doing a mini series about Jim Jones and the People's Temple Church. It has been 46 years since the largest mass suicide potential murder has happened. And there has never, no, stupid. Start over. I'm just going to go into it because I think I'm going to use the AI part and just say that. So we'll make a sound bite for it instead. I'll just go into the episode.
Okay.
Okay. By the time Lynetta Putnam was a teenager, she was incredibly disenchanted with her ordinary family living an ordinary life. From adolescence into her adulthood, Lynetta had developed quite a few unsavory behaviors. One in particular was her ability to lie convincingly. Lynetta once told a group of neighborhood kids that her family was a cover up, that she was actually royalty in hiding. Lav, I think you're royalty in hiding. Royalty
I am.
in hiding.
I am.
Lynetta lied. What?
I must be part of this family.
You might be. Lynetta lied about everything, even the pronunciation of her name. So she was actually not Lynetta Putnam. She was just simply Lynette. But Lynetta, and we're going to keep calling her that because why not? She liked the name enough to give it to herself.
I mean, if I knew it was that simple, I would change my name a long time ago.
I don't know. It's weird. I don't know what's going on because I'm not getting my rhythm. And I don't know why. Okay, I'm going to start over. There's some reason why I'm not, I may even have to wait and do this. There's some reason why it's not flowing for me.
Try again, and then if this time it doesn't start flowing, then we can just do it a different day.
Okay. So let's see.
No sense in forcing it.
No. What's up, party people?
Hello, hello, hello.
Lav and I have a very special series for you. Lav and I have a very special episode for you. It is the first in a 3-part series on the Jim Jones People's Temple mass murder. And you heard me right, mass murder. For 46 years, it has been believed that 908 people, men, women, and children, committed suicide. But new records, new evidence, and new interviews have been released to show that it was not a suicide at all. And this still stands as one of the largest mass suicides or mass murders in history. So we're going to begin with episode 1. We're going to begin with episode 1. Lynetta Putnam and John Henry Jones. By the time Lynetta Putnam was a teenager, she was incredibly disenchanted with her ordinary life, her ordinary family. From adolescence into her adulthood, Lynetta had developed quite a few unsavory behaviors, like most of us have. In our teenage years, we learn to curse, lie. Some of us may have sticky fingers. Some may discover drugs and alcohol, but for Lynetta, it was other little behaviors. One in particular was her ability to lie convincingly. Lynetta once told a group of neighborhood kids that her family was only a cover up. She actually had been adopted and was in hiding because she was a royal that had been exiled from a country she wouldn't name. Lynetta lied about everything, even the pronunciation of her name. Lynetta Putman was actually just Lynette.
Good old Lynette.
Good old Lynette. Lynetta, and yes, we will keep calling her that because that is what she went by, and why not? Contorted different religions to create her own belief system, basically her own tailored religion. She used this make-believe religion to describe her importance to the world and to explain that she'd lived many, many lives before and that she would live many, many lives after. And she was going to be important in every one of them. Lynetta usually made these outlandish claims with a full glass of Kentucky bourbon in her hand.
Ooh, my kind of girl.
And she would often preach, quote, "Y'all just watch how important in this life I will be." Lynetta had no idea. No idea. By the age of 21, Lynetta had ruined 2 marriages and had failed to produce any children. And now, so in the 30s, this was something that literally could end your life if you didn't marry well, or you didn't have children to sustain your marriage. As a woman, you'd be kicked out onto the curb, basically. You wouldn't have anything. We couldn't own land. We could barely work, but our husbands were pretty much in charge of everything. So you had to be sure that you married a prominent, well-educated, or a wealthy man to sustain your life. So leaving her town and moving to Crete, Indiana, Lynetta meets mild-mannered World War I veteran John Henry Jones. From the whispers around Crete, the bachelor was from a prominent, wealthy farming family who owned a lot of different plots of land. So as Lynetta prepared to be the pampered wife of a wealthy man, 2 major issues escaped her attention while she was courting John Henry.
Okay.
While stationed in Germany, John Henry had been exposed to an astronomical amount of mustard gas. Lav, you being our female veteran, what is mustard gas?
It is a chemical that burns if it gets into your eyes and nose and into your lungs, and there's all kinds of problems that they figured out now cause cancer and skin problems. And
yeah, it's the grandpappy of pepper spray, but it's the grandpappy on steroids of pepper spray.
This doesn't kill you. It doesn't. Well, I guess people could have had allergic reactions to it and died, but it's not meant to kill you. It's just meant to fuck you up for a time,
so that the opposing side can advance in. But as Lav was saying, This continuous exposure caused pulmonary fibrosis, which is a terminal respiratory disease. So what happens is you start to develop fibroids, so big knots of just tissue starts to form, and it forms in your lungs. And as it forms in your lungs, it takes the place of the arterial pathways that allow you to take in a big breath, let out a big breath. It very, very severely impedes on your ability to breathe. And after a time and so many fibroids um, develop, you slowly suffocate. And secondly, the Jones family was wealthy landowners, not John Henry. So, so the whispers around town was the Jones family had money, and they did. But John Henry, as an individual, did not. Um, his small military checks weren't even close enough to pay the bills. So he took on a grueling job of working on the roads. So can you imagine this for a second, guys? You have a man who's barely breathing. And it is so labored, it's so hard that he would get to where he couldn't even speak. Because even to speak, to exert himself that much, caused a fit of coughing, sometimes coughing up of blood. It was not, he would lose his breath, he could pass out. To go work in a time when they laid roads, everything was by hand. It was grueling. It was hot. It was unforgiving. And this was the only thing this man could do. And so Lynetta, as her now new husband is working on the roads, Lynetta is left to work the very farm she was supposed to be spoiled with. So the Jones family gives the newly married couple a small farm in Crete to get them going. But with no money for field hands, no money for crops, no money for livestock, the farm wasn't going anywhere. And Lynetta's ideas of being pampered died the day she put the first tool into the soil of the Jones farm. John Henry, soft-spoken and calm, was loved by the town folks. He was welcomed with open arms. And not only because of his good nature, but his family's good name. Every town has a family that at one time, like I'll give you an example, Modesto. In Modesto, the family that built Modesto, California, was named the McHenrys. And the McHenry, now we have a McHenry Museum, we have a McHenry Mansion, and we have a McHenry Road. And this is all named after this prominent family. So in the 30s and 40s, if you walked down the street in your best clothing and somebody greeted you, if they didn't already know what your name was, the minute you told them, you were in. Like you could go anywhere and do anything because of your family name. And Lynetta was boisterous and violent and not accepted at all by the townsfolk. She loved to cuss. She loved to drink. She was our kind of woman. Laugh. She fought like a man, drank like a sailor. But what made all of this even worse is that Lynetta was with child.
Mm.
The question of paternity was whispered about, especially due to John Henry's respiratory disease. But nevertheless, on May 13th, 1931, which, come to think of it, today is May 13th, isn't it?
Oh, it is.
So on this day in 1931, John Henry and Lynetta Jones welcomed a bouncing baby boy they named James Warren Jones. The Jones family gave support monetarily to help keep John Henry's little family off of the streets because they weren't making, bless you,
Thank you.
they weren't making anything. They weren't making any type of money. The money that John Henry got from his military stipend and from what work he could do on the road didn't go anywhere. It didn't last. So they were in the poorhouse. But when Jim was 5 years old, the Joneses family cut off their financial assistance. They lost the farm, leaving them no choice but to move to an apartment in a nearby town of Lynn. So what happens is the Jones family says, he's 5 years old. He can go to school and you can go to work, Lynetta. Lynetta was not happy about this. And as you'll hear, she made everybody's life a living hell because of it. Now, one major thing that separated the Joneses from the townsfolk was their reluctance to attend the Methodist church. You're in a small town, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I live in a small town. Lav is from a small town. I'm not sure how it is in Maryland, but here, the most prominent families, the farmers, the dairymen, the construction, all of the prominent families go to church. And my community is a Catholic community. So there's one Protestant church and like 4 Catholic churches. And so if you did not go to church, you were looked down upon. And it's even still kind of the same here now. But with them not, being a part of the church, any welfare that the church offered, clothing, food, jobs, money, any of that help, the Joneses were never eligible. They were never eligible for it. Lynetta took a job in the local factory, and John Henry's health started a speedy decline. And with these developments, little Jimmy was severely neglected, especially by his oppressively angry mother. So Lynetta's pissed at life. Life has dealt her, a hand that she didn't want and she wasn't expecting. She was supposed to be pampered. She was supposed to be rich. She was supposed to be, endured by everybody.
Right.
And when this didn't happen and she had to be like the commoners and go to work, she took her anger out on John Henry and on little Jimmy. Little Jim was often seen wandering around town. He was barefoot, he was dirty, and he was starving. And while he was searching the town, he was looking for a mother figure. And he was looking for one in the arms of all of the town's people, town's women, who collectively did get together and care for this wayward boy. But sadly, their help was limited because think about it. Most of them probably had their own children. This is also right around time of the Depression. So, the Great Depression has already happened. People are still trying to rebuild. It doesn't take a week or two and you're fine. The Depression took years upon years upon years. So sadly, they were limited in what they could do. But there was a silver lining that was about to shine on little Jim Jones, an angelic mother by the name of Myrtle Kennedy. So Myrtle Kennedy was the Joneses' next door neighbor.
Oh.
And her husband was the pastor of that Methodist church. And she was very devout. She lived her life for God and for her husband. Now, just a real quick explanation. Let me explain how this domination works. Their belief system is that God's Holy Spirit empowers certain disciples to not be helpless to sin. So certain people are immune to sin. They nothing they do in the eyes of God is a sin. And then also too, the complete sanctification of that Christian gives them the ability to sin in exceptional cases. So basically what it was is that if you were sanctified by God, you were identified as a sanctified disciple of God, you could break the 10 Commandments and you weren't sinning. You weren't going against God because God told you it was okay for you to do it. Because you are, that person is no longer under the label of being a product of original sin. Jim Jones would completely morph this into his own type of dictator leadership, telling everyone he, and he alone, is the only person who was deserving of and received Christ's sanctification. Myrtle molded him into a pious example of her faith and into the preacher he would become. But let's continue into Jim's adolescence, because little Jimmy had a couple pretty serious obsessions. And these obsessions, as you will see, led to the devastation in Guyana. So young Jim had an unnatural obsession with death. Searching roadsides and other areas for roadkill, Jim would hold pop-up funerals for these animals.
Oh.
So in his Sunday best, which was a slacks, a white shirt, a tie, a vest and jacket, he would gather the town's children and pray over this dead animal. And he would give a sermon. Now, this is a kid that is 6, 7, 8 years old. A lot of us at 6, 7, and 8 may have been, like curious about different things. Like you see a dead animal, or your goldfish dies, or, the gerbil gets out and you don't know what happens to him. And then you find, bits of fur all around your dog's bed. We're curious about why this happens, but not to the level of performing funerals for these deceased animals. And then after he gave a sermon on it, then he would designate, a couple of boys in the group to bury the animals. It's easy to see how this alone would make people see him as being eccentric. And they did. He was the weird kid. I know how that is. I was the weird kid. But not to that level. And yet, nonetheless, people flocked to this oddball who was determined to be the next world's Messiah. So it didn't matter how weird he was. There was just something about him that people, and you'll see as we go into him as an adult and the atrocities that happened under his command, how he was so, enigmatic that people were willing to do almost anything for him
Right.
and did. Another obsession Jim developed in his youth circled around sex. At the tender age of 10, when he wasn't presiding over a roadkill funeral, he was holding sex education classes in Myrtle's backyard. Now, Lev, please use your analytical brain and your educational training. What does it say about a child, regardless of gender, who is obsessed with sex at such a young age?
That they have some sort of sexual abuse or something going on.
Mm-hmm. And when I worked in mental health, that was what we always saw. Is it was introduced to them in some way, shape, or form, and it wouldn't take long to where the child would tell you where it came from, what happened. But there's absolutely no sexual assault, no molestation, no inappropriate sexual actions that happened to Jim Jones that has been recorded anywhere. And it also, through different forensic studies in the last 10 years, they can't find any source of how Jim got this information on such a mature subject. But let's think back for just a minute. He has a loudmouth drunkard of a mother. And his father is dying a slow death. Women's libidos don't always die when their husbands do. So I'm going to take a stab in the dark and just point the finger at Lynetta. A teenage Jim Jones was still quite the oddball, but his dark eyes, his strong jawline, and his pompadour solid onyx black hair attracted all the available girls in school. So he was that high school guy that walked on to campus. He wasn't a jock. He wasn't a nerd. There was just something about him that the girls, probably even some of the boys, but they're not going to say anything at that time, liked about him and was drawn to him. But a darkness, and most deadly of his obsessions, developed around this time, developed in high school. After discovering the book Mein Kampf, which is German for My Struggle, Jim began to study the ways of one Adolf Hitler. Jim desired this man's power. He worshiped. He wanted to be this man because, for any of you that may be a little hazy on your history, there was a whole country that followed right behind Adolf Hitler. And they did atrocious things. Some of them because they wanted to, some of them because they had to. But in the end, he was loved and worshipped by many, thousands upon thousands. Jim's desire to be worshipped like this evil man overshadowed everything. But trouble was on the horizon for this teenage wannabe. Jesus Christ. After 24 years of being saddled with a sick, weakly man, Lynetta packed Jim up, leaving John Henry and Lynn, and moved to Richmond to be with her new lover. So, needing a way to reconcile this situation to align with his spiritual beliefs, Jim began to tell a horrific series of stories about the physical abuse at the hands of his father. He told anyone that would listen that John Henry beat his mother, beat him, and they had no choice but to run away from him in the middle of the night. When reality was, this man was so sick that there's no way in hell he ever laid a hand on anybody. Like his mother, Jim was tailoring his life to be what he desired it to be, with a lie after a lie after a lie. Jim never showed an ounce of compassion for his frail, medically fragile father. And sadly, in 1952, John Henry Jones would die penniless and alone.
Sad.
It's sad. I feel for you. The poor man, he didn't do anything to ask for that kind of life, and he got it. Education of the standard type never appealed to the budding religious guru. So he took a job as an orderly in one of the worst hospitals in the Richmond, Indianapolis, Indiana area. While not on safari for extreme holiness, Jim, a 17-year-old Jim, roamed the halls of Reed Memorial Hospital. Among the decay, the illness, and death, he developed a reputation of being kind of a ringleader, I guess you could say. He developed a reputation of being fantastic with problematic patients. He could soothe them. He could get them to do what he wanted or what the doctor wanted them to do. He very easily convinced these people to just bend to his will. But it was not this sensationalized reputation that would bring him to work each day over and over. It was actually a 21-year-old nursing student by the name of Marceline Baldwin. Jim and Marceline went around searching for a religious environment that appealed to this showman. And he found it in an abandoned storefront that was now occupied illegally by a Reverend McFarland and his revival type of sermon deliverance. So, quick description. If you've never been to a revival or you've never watched like an old movie where one is happening, churches, some still now, but most of the churches back in this time frame, they were very ceremonious. The pastor talked in a certain way. The congregation dressed in a certain way. They behaved in a certain way, and there was no substitution for it. It was, this is how you behave, this is how you worship, and this is who you are in this environment. But revivals, and even now, revivals are so much more exciting and entertaining because you have a religious leader that is up in front and he's yelling and he's screaming and he's dancing around, he's throwing his hands and holding snakes. They'll talk about taking up serpents and that no serpent can harm them because they are sanctified in the image of Christ. And the people in the audience would jump around. They'd throw their hands up. They would sing. They would talk in tongues. And for anybody that doesn't know what talking in tongues is, it's supposed to be a hidden language between a worshiper, a devout worshiper, and God. So the language that spontaneously comes out, spouts out from this person is supposed to be words only God himself can understand. And the other more pious, traditional, religious people in town, they just dismissed, Reverend McFarland called them the Holy Rollers, and just wouldn't, they didn't give any kind of merit to that type of worship. But the Holy Rollers drew Jim in like a moth to a flame. He wanted so badly to be like this pastor, because this pastor was flamboyant. He was animated. He sensational as he danced around, as he held snakes. He held them out to the congregation, showing them that even though they would bite him, he wouldn't suffer. It wouldn't hurt. Nothing would happen. Nothing could happen to him because he was of God. He was like God. And there were the healings. So Reverend McFarland would call out a parishioner's name, and they would come up, and he would lay his hands on them, and he would heal them. People who were in wheelchairs would walk. People with casts on their hands or feet magically be okay. The blind would see, the deaf would hear, the mute would speak. What do you think about this kind of religious showboating?
I think it's all exaggerated.
And you'd be very right. Reverend McFarland did not suffer from snake bites because the fangs of the snakes had been removed.
Oh.
Reverend McFarland could heal because the people that were in the audience had already been told to him ahead of time were his followers, his very strict followers, who were planted into the different audiences so that the ordinary parishioners would give all of their money, all of their time, everything to Reverend McFarland to heal their truly sick loved one, not somebody acting. And I'm just going to take a second. This has nothing to do with religion in this moment right here. This has to do with a con man who used his ability to speak and played upon the weakness and the fear and the need of these very helpless, very scared, very needy people. And Jim Jones would do the very same thing. From a very religious family herself, Marceline was immediately smitten by this arrogant but handsome man. Have you ever gone out with someone who was like super, super arrogant? They were kind of an asshole, but there was just something about them that you couldn't get past.
Yeah.
I think we all have, regardless of what gender or genders that you date. There's always an arrogant asshole that you just cannot stop thinking about.
Right.
Despite Marceline's father's objections, due to Jim's very left-wing politics, desire for segregation, desire for integration, for segregation to end, and his impromptu sermons at the dinner table. Jim and Marceline were married on June 12, 1949. So Jim would be in their house, and now Marceline's father was a pastor as well, but Jim would break out into these sermons at the dinner table where he stood up, he talked in tongues, he shook his hands around, he like did exactly what Pastor McFarland did. And Pastor Baldwin, this was not religion to him, and he was not okay with it. Being an uneducated man and his student wife restricted the newly married Joneses from living in their own home. So, like a lot of parents even now, the Baldwins let the Joneses occupy Marceline's childhood home when they were first married. But after a very extremely heated argument with June Baldwin, his mother-in-law, Jim moved his family, him and Marceline, moved them out and got them their own home in Indianapolis, Indiana. And if any of you are curious as to what this argument was about, Mrs. Baldwin told Jim that it was not Christian for people to marry or even date someone that was not of their own race. Now, before you guys get too bent out of shape about this comment, this was a time when it was unheard of completely to have civil rights. Our darker skinned, our different ethnicity, our different cultural friends and family were not accepted. The Anglo-Saxon Caucasian male ran everything. And this was a common misconception that people who were not of the white race were not as good as white people. And Jim Jones, for all of the bullshit, all of the dangerous, all of the deadly things that he did truly believe in his heart that the races should intermingle. They should be able to marry, and they should all be able to worship in the same church. Now, some of you may be asking, why would he go against everything that he's been taught for this? And simply because, what does a Messiah need? Need a follower. Need followers. And if he's standing there telling everybody that they're equal and they're loved and they're chosen by God to be his people, people went with it. Unfortunately, the reality was Jim Jones was a selfish and racist of a man. He believed that black men were more sexually equipped than himself, and he would disempower them to where he stood up here on the mountain and all the other men stood down here. So that Jones be in control. It wasn't long after this, Jim revealed to Marceline that he did not believe in the teachings of the King James Bible. That he didn't believe in the idealization of the Holy Trinity being and anyone who's Catholic will immediately, and some Christians, but will immediately understand this. When they make the sign of the cross for themselves, it's the Father down, the Son
Mm-hmm.
over, and the Holy Spirit over. Jim said that he didn't believe in that.
Hmm.
There was no, the Bible wasn't true, because he had spoken with God. God had told him truly how things were. His belief was God was a civil rights crusader, and he believed that he was called upon to be a politically radical socialist. Marceline, unhappy with this development in her married life, went to her mother for advice. And being the wife of a pastor, her mother sealed Marceline's fate by reminding her that divorce was a sin and she needed to obey her husband, because that is one of the 10 commandments, is you honor thy father and mother and you obey your husband. And that meant no matter what.
Right.
So while Jim is working different odd jobs, he's trying to get together a church so he can start to make that his lifestyle. Ronnie Baldwin, who was a cousin to Marceline, is taken in by Jim and Marceline because the state, had removed him from his mother's care. And what appeared to be a Christian based act of kindness turned into an inappropriate relationship between Jim and Ronnie. Jim had frequent, intimate talks with Ronnie, teaching the boy things that should have been reserved for when he was closer to an adult age. So Jim took it upon himself to teach this little 10-year-old boy all about sex, all about what people do when they have sex, and what men are supposed to do, what women are supposed to do. All of these things that are just so completely over this poor kid's head. So it sounds like, to me, this very slight neglect that he was going through was nothing compared to what he got thrown into with Jim and Marceline's home. What was even more devastating was Jim's constant rantings about Ronnie's mom and her inability to care for him. So, very boisterous, even in things that involved his home. Not long after taking Ronnie in to their home, Jim and Marceline offered to adopt Ronnie. They said, "You can be our son. We'll give you everything that you need to live." And Ronnie straight out said, "Fuck no." Did he actually say fuck? Probably not. But he refused, and he refused animately to be their son. And this would bring one of the first in a series of many heartbreaks to a very loving Marceline. She wanted to be a mom. More than anything, she wanted to be a mom. And these are heartbreaks that she would experience by Jim's actions. But Jim's had a plan. But Jim had a plan. Jim, as you'll see, always had a plan.
Hmm.
Jim Jones was about to become the next Messiah. And every Messiah, self-proclaimed or not, needs his apostles and his believers. And it went like this. In his quest to find his place among the righteous, visits numerous churches, but kept returning to the electrifying energy he felt during the revivals and the active worship he witnessed during sermons given in predominantly black churches. In 1955, Jim Jones became ordained, and the persona of Reverend Jim Jones is born. One of the first integrated churches opens its doors in Indianapolis in 1955, and it is called the People's Temple. The Reverend and Mrs. Jones are the first family in Indiana to adopt a black child, which would eventually be called the Joneses Rainbow Family, is created. Jim and Marceline adopted 4 of their 6 children, both from a Korean background and from an African American background. They had one biological son, and then they had it was a daughter, but she was related to Marceline. In fact, I believe she was actually the big sister of little Ronnie. She was adopted by Jim and Marceline, but she ended up going kind of her own way and getting married, and then eventually came back to the church. But he would father 3 more children with 2 other very important women in his life. These women would be Carolyn Layton and Maria Casares. And since we're on the topic of Jones's inner circle, let's meet the women of Jonestown. The actual driving force behind Reverend Jim Jones. He didn't do anything without these women. And it was Carolyn Layton, her sister Annie Moore, his wife Marceline, and his other lover, Maria Casares. In 1964, Reverend and Mother Jones, as she was now known, in the Unity Church of Indianapolis, moved their family to Redwoods, California, and opened the doors of the second People's Temple in San Francisco. But this is the People's Temple everybody will recognize. This is the beginning of their trek to Guyana, because Jim Jones wanted to create his own world with his own people. The daughter of a Baptist pastor, Carolyn Moore Layton, along with her then husband Larry, who had recently relocated to Mendocino County, became intrigued by the charismatic leader, the revolutionary civil rights movement, and the integrated People's Temple. Jim set his eyes on an intelligent but distinctly cold Carolyn Layton to satisfy his big sex drive and even bigger ego. In a telephone conversation with her family, Carolyn explains that her and Jim are in love, but they cannot marry because of Mother Jones's standing in the church, but that she is supposed to serve Jim Jones. God has put her in this place to do this. The once whimsical, free-thinking teacher was morphing into a ruthless authoritarian and an unceremoniously Jim's right-hand man. Now, Stephen Jones, who is the only biological child of Jim and Marceline, talks about his father taking him to Carolyn's house just outside of San Francisco and introduces him to her. And he was ecstatic to be with his dad because he didn't get a lot of time with his dad. His dad was always busy networking and preaching and going out and just trying to get his vision into reality. So his dad telling him, let's go take a car ride, thrilled him more than probably Christmas morning. until he recognized from behind a closed door the sounds of lovemaking, and understanding that the woman his father was making love to was not his mother.
Hmm.
After Jim and Carolyn made love, she began to hum a song to him, to Jim. And Stephen, so outraged, when they return to their home, goes to tell his mother what just happened. And through the kitchen door, he hears his mother humming the very same song.
Hmm.
Marceline knew. She knew about everything. But as she had told different groups, if I have to share my husband for the greater good, I will share my husband for the greater good. Jim called these affairs offerings for the cause. So he had sexual relationships with pretty much everybody in the church, male, female, some whisperings of pedophilia. But the thing of it is nobody in the church, regardless of their marital status, could have sex if Jim didn't tell them it was okay. Can you imagine not being able to show Bo Betty any affection because your spiritual leader said no?
I wouldn't be in that church anyway.
No.
I don't like people to tell me what to do.
Yeah, I don't take directions. I barely take suggestions. In 1975, Carolyn gives birth to a baby boy she names Jim John Prokes. Now, okay, where does Prokes come from? Prokes is the name of another temple member. She used his last name to keep the spotlight off of Jim, which now the whole congregation is calling Father. Sometimes they called him Father Jones. Sometimes they called him Father God, but he was always Father. And Jim John, the little boy, would go by the Hawaiian name of Chemo. Chemo is Hawaiian for Jim. And this little boy was loved. He was loved by all of Carolyn's family, all of Jim's family. Like, this little kid was just and when we do when this hits our YouTube channel, I'm gonna throw in a whole bunch of pictures and stuff so you guys could just see how revolutionary this was. How at this time period people didn't know what to do, and he was so charming. He was so debonair. They couldn't help but follow him. Along with Carolyn's younger sister Annie, came they came with just over 1,000 People's Temple followers fly out to Guyana. Jim's high-ranking members and inner circle gain another by the name of Maria Casares. Maria Casares, by her father's account, became emotionally and morally confused with the changing politics, falling for Jim's style of preaching, joins the People's Temple administration, rising in rank from a letter writer to Jim's personal finance manager, as well as another lover in Reverend's harem. So every bit of money that the People's Temple, Jim Jones, the administration received was from members. Members were convinced to sell their properties, to give their properties, give all their money. Social Security. They were told that this would give them a greater afterlife. This would give them such a beautiful place in heaven at Jim's feet. Not God's feet, at Jim's feet. Reverend Jim Jones became nothing more than a figure for the people to worship, as Annie, Maria, and especially Carolyn kept Jones shot up with barbiturates that he was severely addicted to. We'll get more into this in our next episode. We will discuss what happened after 1,000 people moved to Guyana for this one man. It wouldn't take long for people to begin to claim that there was madness going on, that they sought out a hero. This hero's name was Leo the Lion Ryan. Congressman Ryan was no stranger to the fight. He had been fighting social injustices, education as a substitute teacher. He investigated the deplorable conditions of Los Angeles area schools and their scum, their slumlords that put certain people into living situations that a rat wouldn't even survive in.
Right.
And as you will hear, Congressman Ryan and another group of faithful will make a trip to the Jonestown Agricultural Project in Guyana. And when we meet again, my friends, there's only one place we can go. As a small airplane lands on a dirt airstrip just outside of Guyana, a darkness spreads through a housing building to the pavilion square. In the middle of the People's Temple Agricultural Project, a white night was on the horizon. 918 people's lives hanging in the balance of the wills between two very powerful men. Please join us for the second episode, to where we learn just what happened, not just any story, the real story behind the Jonestown Massacre.